Something just happened in the skies over Iran that has military analysts from Washington to Tel Aviv doing double takes. In what can only be described as a lightning-fast shock campaign, the United States, working alongside with Israel, appears to have done the unthinkable, crippled the Iranian Air Force so quickly that many of its jets never even left the ground. Now, here's a twist. For decades, the leadership in Tehran, backed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, poured money and effort into maintaining a fleet that included old war horses like the F-4 Phantom, the F-14 Tomcat, and even the F-5 Tiger. They believe that those aircraft, plus air defenses like the Bavar 373, a copy of Russia's S-300, would at least give them some breathing room during a conflict. But according to statements that are coming from General Dan Kane, along with comments from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the strikes coordinated by U.S. Central Command have completely flipped the entire equation in a matter of hours. I mean, even President Donald J. Trump has weighed in, saying that the impact on Iran's infrastructure has been, in his words, very powerful. And the ripple effects, well, they're already spreading across the region, from Saudi Arabia to the United Arab Emirates, as analysts debate what this means for the balance of power in the Middle East. So buckle up, guys, because what we're about to walk through, this isn't just a story about bombs and jets. This is a story about strategy, about surprise, and a military reality that very few people saw coming. And hey guys, if you enjoy deep dives like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on the next one. And if by the end of this video, if you found this breakdown helpful or interesting, feel free to leave a like on your way out. Totally appreciate you. All right, let's start with the moment that sent shockwaves across the Middle East. Now, for decades, Iran tried to build an air force that could at least defend its own skies. Not to dominate them, not to control the region, just defend them. The Iranian Air Force kept flying aircraft like the F-4 Phantom, the F-14 Tomcat, and the F-5 Tiger. These are planes that, let's be honest, guys, they were already old when some of us were kids. Now, Tehran believed that fleet, combined with air defenses run by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, would give them some breathing room during a conflict. But the United States showed up, and suddenly the skies over Iran didn't belong to Iran anymore. They belonged to the United States and Israel. Within hours, according to statements tied to U.S. Central Command and confirmed by remarks from General Dan Kane, American and Israeli air forces achieved something every military on Earth tries to do in the opening hours of a conflict: total air superiority. In simple terms, Iran's air force went from existing to being basically irrelevant. Now, imagine spending nearly half a century building a military capability, training plots, maintaining aircraft, building bases, and then poof, gone in days. This is the scale of the shock here. Across the Middle East, from Saudi Arabia to the United Arab Emirates, military planners suddenly realized something huge. If the United States wants control of the skies, it takes it. And there's not much anybody can do about it. So now, here's where things get even more unbelievable, because many of Iran's jets weren't destroyed in dogfights. They were actually destroyed before they even moved. Strikes hit Iran air bases like Tabriz, where aircraft were just sitting on the runway or parked inside of hangars. We're talking about jets like the F-4 Phantoms and the F-14 Tomcats, the F-5 Tigers, the Su-22 attack aircraft. These planes never even got the chance to start their engines. Now, according to footage that was released from channels linked to U.S. Central Command, missiles slammed into airfields with surgical precision. Runways, fuel depots, aircraft shelters, boom, 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 just destroying them all. And then suddenly the Iranian Air Force was staring at rows and rows of burning aircraft that never left the ground. It's kind of like showing up to a boxing match and then discovering that the other guy knocked you out in the parking lot. Now, remember something important here, guys. This wasn't just the United States acting alone. The Israeli Air Force was working in coordination as well. American planning, Israeli targeting, and the result? Entire squadrons of Iranian aircraft turn into smoking craters. And this happened so fast that many Iranian pilots reportedly never even attempted to take off. This is how quickly the skies were lost. Now, here's the part that really makes military analysts lean forward in their chairs, because this didn't just happen. This was planned very carefully, very strategically. The United States and Israel didn't just wake up one morning and say, hey, you know what, Benjamin Netanyahu? What's up, Trump? Hey, let's go ahead and blow up some airplanes. No, that's not exactly what happened. This was a coordinated attack. This was a coordinated strategy that was designed to do one thing above all else: win control of the sky immediately. Now, according to remarks that are tied to General Dan Kane, the United States military and the Israeli Air Force worked together to cripple Iran's ability to respond before the fighting even started. Now, think about the targets they hit, right? Not just aircraft, but command centers, communication hubs, radar systems, logistics facilities, missile launch infrastructure. So this wasn't random bombing. This was a surgical blitz. Runways were hit, hangars were hit, control networks were hit. The idea was simple. If Iran can't see you, if Iran can't communicate, if Iran can't launch aircraft, then the war in the skies is over before it begins. And this is exactly what happened. So within hours, the United States and Israel achieved what every modern military dreams of: total operational freedom in the air. So Iran's jets weren't fighting. They were burning. And this is why military analysts across the region, from Saudi Arabia to Kuwait, immediately started reassessing the balance of power in the Middle East. Because when the United States Air Force takes the skies, everything else changes. Now, quick pause here. If you know somebody who still thinks modern wars are fought the way that they were decades ago, please share this video with them, because what just happened here completely changed the game. So now here's the twist most people did not see. The bombs, they weren't the first attack. The first attack happened in silence, before any aircraft crossed Iranian airspace, before any missiles hit runways. The United States military launched something called non-kinetic warfare. Now, I know it sounds a little complicated, but it really just means this: they attacked Iran's military systems without firing bullets. Cyber operations, electronic warfare, signal disruption, communication interference. In other words, they blinded Iran. Radar systems stopped seeing clearly, command centers started struggling to communicate, air defense operations suddenly couldn't coordinate. So imagine trying to defend your country when your radar is confused, your communications are scrambled, and your command centers are struggling just to talk to each other. This is what Iran faced. And by the time the first American aircraft moved into position, Iran's defenses were pretty much already disoriented. So when the actual strikes began, when jets and missiles started hitting airfields, Iran wasn't responding. Iran was scrambling. This is why so many aircraft were destroyed on the ground, because by the time Tehran realized what was happening, the sky already belonged to the United States and Israel. And before we talk about what's happening hundreds of miles away, something extraordinary is happening right now in technology, and most people have absolutely no idea it's unfolding. So while the media obsesses over daily political drama, a completely different revolution is quietly taking shape. This is one that could determine which nations dominate the next century of science, artificial intelligence, national defense, and even economic power. And of course, if you've been following President Donald J. Trump, you already know one thing that he's been absolutely clear about: America must lead the future of technology. From AI to advanced computing, the next generation of strategic innovation will determine whether the United States remains the global leader. And that brings us to today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Outside the Box Capital on behalf of Xanadu Quantum Technologies, a quantum computing company currently associated with Crane Harbor Acquisition Corporation. Now, if you want to learn more about Xanadu, they're listed on the NASDAQ under ticker symbol CHAC, or you can go to their investor website. There's a link down below you can click on. Now, here's why this matters. Traditional computers process information using bits, ones and zeros, but quantum computers operate in an entirely different realm of physics, allowing them to tackle problems that would probably take classic computers years or even centuries. So Xanadu is building these next generation computers using something called photonic quantum computing, which means their systems use particles of light, or photons, to carry quantum information. This approach could solve one of the biggest problems in quantum computing: scalability. Now, most quantum machines today are extremely fragile and they're difficult to scale, but Xanadu's architecture is different. Their flagship system, called Aurora, is designed as the world's first networked modular quantum computer. So instead of one massive machine, Aurora connects many smaller quantum processors together, almost like building blocks. Add more modules and you add more computing power. This is a fundamentally different way of thinking about quantum systems, and the company already has a working foundation. Their earlier system, Borealis, demonstrated that their photonic quantum technology can run extremely complex calculations through cloud access. Now, in simple terms, Borealis proved the concept. Aurora is designed to scale it. Now, Xanadu has also built the software ecosystem around their hardware. Their developer platform, Penny Lane, allows engineers to program quantum computers using familiar languages like Python, and it already has over 200,000 monthly downloads and 35,000 active users. The company has even collaborated with major global organizations like Rolls-Royce Holdings, Lockheed Martin, and even Mitsubishi Chemical to explore applications in aerospace, defense technology, and semiconductor manufacturing. Now, these are exactly the kinds of strategic industries that President Donald Trump has repeatedly emphasized as critical to America's technological leadership. And companies that are working in these areas may play a major role in the next wave of global innovation. Now, again, if you want to learn more about Xanadu Quantum Technologies, currently listed on the NASDAQ under ticker symbol CHAC, you can visit their investor website at investors.xanadu.ai, link down below. Now, I do want to make something very clear. I'm not an investment advisor, and nothing in this video should be considered investment advice. Investors should always conduct their own due diligence before making any investment decisions. All right, so let's get back to the story, because what happened next explains why Iran's air defenses collapsed so quickly. So now this raises the obvious question. If Iran has been preparing for conflict with the United States for decades, why didn't its air defenses stop any of this, right? Because on paper, Iran actually had a pretty large air defense network. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, reportedly operated around 100 systems designed to detect and shoot down incoming aircraft. Some of these systems were based on technology from Russia and China. You may have heard of things like the S-300, which Russia developed. Iran tried to copy systems like that with its own versions, such as the Bavar 373. They also fielded systems inspired by China's HQ-7, along with local platforms like the Yazar and the Zubin. Sounds impressive, right? I mean, but here's the problem. A lot of those systems were essentially reverse engineered copies. And copies of copies of copies don't always perform like the original, especially when you add two more problems. First, sanctions. Iran struggled to obtain replacement parts. Second, coordination. Air defense systems rely on radar networks, command centers, and communication lines. And remember what the United States attacked first? Those exact systems. So when American aircraft and Israeli aircraft moved into position, Iran's defenses weren't ready. Some radars were jammed, some systems were just offline, some operators were simply overwhelmed. This is how dozens, possibly hundreds of Iranian aircraft ended up destroyed, not in combat, but just sitting on the ground. So now let's talk about what happened when one side wins the sky. This is what military planners call air superiority, and it changes everything. So when the United States Air Force achieves air superiority, it means American pilots can operate over enemy territory with relatively little resistance. Now, in this case, this meant aircraft like the F-15 Strike Eagles, the F-16s, the F-18s, and even the stealth F-35. These aren't just fighter jets. These are flying technology platforms packed with sensors, radar systems, and advanced weapons. Now, going up against them in older aircraft like the F-4 Phantom or the F-5 Tiger, this would be like bringing a flip phone to a smartphone convention. Technically, you can make a call, sure, but you're not winning the competition. So once Iran's radar systems were disrupted and its air defenses were weakened, American aircraft could patrol Iranian airspace with far greater freedom. That meant more strikes on air bases, more strikes on military systems and missile systems, more strikes on military infrastructure. And with every passing hour, Iran's ability to respond got weaker, because when you lose the sky, you don't just lose airplanes. You lose the ability to defend everything underneath them. So now the United States and Israel realized Iran's air bases and air defenses were struggling. Something interesting happened. The aircraft being used in the strike started to change. At the beginning of a conflict like this, the United States Air Force usually sends its most stealthy aircraft first. These are planes designed to slip past radar and strike key targets without being detected. One of those aircraft is the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. Now, you've probably seen pictures of it, the one that kind of looks like a giant flying boomerang. So the B-2 is used when the enemy still has strong radar and missile defenses. But then something else appeared in the skies, the B-1 Lancer. Now, the B-1 is an incredible bomber, fast, powerful, capable of carrying huge payloads, but it's not stealth like the B-2 bomber. So when analysts saw the B-1 Lancer flying missions over Iran, they immediately understood what that meant. It meant the United States military believed that Iran's air defenses had already been crippled. In other words, America was no longer sneaking around, it was just flying openly. And when a bomber like the B-1 starts operating comfortably in your airspace, this means your radar network and military and missile systems are no longer doing their job. That shift right there, from stealth bombers like the B-2 Spirit to conventional bombers like the B-1 Lancer, this was a huge signal. It meant the skies were effectively controlled by the United States, and Iran knew it. But here's a deeper issue. Even before this conflict even started, Iran's Air Force was already struggling. And this is where the story becomes a little bit more ironic. So many of Iran's aircraft actually came from the United States. Back before the 1979 revolution, Iran was an American ally, believe it or not. That's why the Iranian Air Force still flies aircraft like the F-4 Phantoms, the F-14 Tomcats, the F-5 Tigers. These planes were cutting edge at the time in the 1970s, but modern air combat has changed dramatically since then. So today's fighters, like the F-35 used by the United States and Israel, they're built around advanced sensors, stealth technology, and long-range targeting. Iran's fleet, by contrast, also includes aircraft like the MiG-29 and the Su-24, older designs from the Soviet Union. So while those planes still exist and they still fly, technically, they struggle against modern aircraft with superior radar, missiles, horsepower, torque, and electronic warfare capabilities. So imagine bringing a classic muscle car to a Formula One race. Sure, the engine roars, but you're not going to win the race. So that's the uncomfortable reality that the Iranian Air Force faced. Their fleet looked large on paper, but in a modern conflict against the United States and Israel, it was severely outmatched. Now, before we move on to what happened next, let me share something important with you for just a moment, okay? Someone emailed me recently and said, Ron, I lost $600 this year because I didn't check my Medicare plan during open enrollment. Now think about that for a second, okay? $600 gone. Not because of anything dramatic, not because of some emergency, just because the plan wasn't reviewed in time. Now here's the painful part. Once that enrollment window closes, there's no undo button. You're locked in for an entire year. And I think most of us would probably agree losing hundreds of dollars over something that could have been caught with a quick review is incredibly frustrating, right? I mean, this is exactly why I partner with Chapter. Chapter reviews your Medicare coverage for free before the window closes so that you're not stuck for 12 months with a plan that's not working for you. Now, honestly, this is one of those situations where it just makes sense to double check things, right? Now, most people are already calling the phone number that you're seeing on the bottom of your screen, 909-563-8279, or they're clicking the link right now to go to askchapter.org/Ron to have their coverage reviewed before the deadline sneaks up on them. Now, again, that phone number is 909-563-8279. So now here's the part that many people miss. Iran's Air Force wasn't just old, it was struggling to stay operational. And a big reason for that was international sanctions. Because of decades of sanctions from the United States and its allies, Israel had a very difficult time buying replacement parts for its aircraft. Now, think about that for a second. Modern fighter jets require constant maintenance. Engines wear out, hydraulics fail, they leak, electronics fail, parts need replacing all the time. But if you can't legally buy those parts, you start improvising. And this is exactly what happened with the Iranian Air Force. Aircraft were being cannibalized, meaning one plane gets taken apart so another plane can keep flying. The result? A shrinking number of aircraft that were actually flyable. So even the Brigadier General Kumaris Hadarian, a former Iranian pilot who trained in the United States, admitted that maintenance problems were becoming serious. There were even accidents. Pilots killed because equipment malfunctioned before the aircraft even took off. So by the time the United States and Israel launched their strikes, Iran's Air Force was already fragile. The bombing campaign didn't just destroy the planes, it destroyed what little operational capacity Iran had left. So here's one of the most shocking details of this entire situation. Iran reportedly launched no manned sorties during the early phase of the conflict. None. Not one major wave of fighter jets. No dramatic dogfights, no heroic last stand in the sky. Why? Because by the time Iranian pilots realized what was even happening, the conditions to fly simply weren't even there. runways were damaged, aircraft were destroyed, command systems were disrupted, and above all else, the skies were already controlled by the United States Air Force. Now imagine being an Iranian pilot in all that situation right there. You know the aircraft available to you might be unreliable, you know the radar systems guiding you might not be working, and you know the aircraft waiting above you include things like the F-15 Strike Eagle, the F-16, and the stealth F-35. Taking off in that situation, even if you could manage to get your aircraft taken off with a destroyed runway, it would mean likely flying directly into overwhelming American air power and then being shot down. Which is probably why many analysts believe Iranian pilots simply never even had the chance. The fight for the skies was effectively decided before it even began. So if Iran's air force was crippled, what options does Tehran actually have left? Well, this is where the battlefield starts to shift, because Iran has spent years investing heavily in drones, unmanned aircraft, cheap small drones, and much easier to replace than the jet fighters. So reports have indicated that Iran launched waves of these drones targeting bases and military infrastructure across several countries in the region, places like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and even the United Arab Emirates. So now, from Iran's perspective, this strategy has one major advantage: cost. A single advanced missile from a system like the United States Patriot air defense system can cost millions of dollars. A drone, a fraction of that, which is exactly why analysts, including Russian unmanned aircraft specialist Dmitry Kuzak, quoted by the Russian news agency TASS, have argued that drone warfare can become a battle of economics. But here's the catch. The United States also has drones, a lot of them. So once American manufacturing ramps up, the United States can produce both interceptor drones and attack drones in massive quantities. So while drones may allow Iran to keep fighting, they don't restore what was lost. Because drones can harass, sure, but they don't control the sky. And controlling the sky is exactly what Iran lost. Which brings us to the bigger picture here, the geopolitical consequences. Because this is not just about aircraft, this is about the balance of power in the Middle East. Statements from President Donald J. Trump have suggested that the strikes had a devastating impact on Iran's military infrastructure. Trump even said much of Iran's military capability, from air defenses to parts of its missile network, had been severely weakened. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned that the situation could escalate further if Iran continues to threaten regional allies. And those allies, countries like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates, they're all watching closely. Because if Iran's air force is effectively removed from the battlefield, that changes everything. Air power is the backbone of modern warfare. Without it, defending territory becomes far more difficult. Projecting power becomes far more difficult. And suddenly the strategic balance shifts. Now, Iran may still threaten. It may still launch drones. It may still fire missiles. But when it comes to the skies, those skies are now dominated by the United States and Israel. And this is the reality that military planners around the world are studying very closely. Because what happened here was fast, shockingly fast. Decades of military buildup neutralized in a matter of hours. Now, of course, that situation continues to evolve, and we're going to be watching very closely every development very, very intently. But one thing is very clear. In the opening phase of this conflict, the United States didn't just win the skies. It erased the competition. Now, if you enjoyed this breakdown and you want more deep dives into geopolitics, strategy, and the forces shaping our world, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you made it this far and found this video interesting or helpful, go ahead and leave a like for it on the way out. Totally appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.